Ever get that, like, hesitant feeling when you're speaking English?
Oh, yeah, totally. Happens to everyone, I think.
It does. It does. You want to say something, but the words just don't, like, flow the way you want them to.
For sure.
Well, today we're diving into this podcast episode that's got some really practical tips to help speak English more fluently.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this episode actually kind of reframes those, like, and ah moments.
Right.
It's not like they're the enemy, more like opportunities, you know?
Yeah. It's like they're saying, like, hey, pausing is totally normal.
Right. Even for native speakers, it's what you do with those pauses that really matters.
Exactly.
And what I found really interesting was how the episode digs into those reasons why we pause in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not always about, like, not knowing the words.
Right.
Sometimes it's like a fear of making mistakes.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Or even speaking too fast.
Speaking too fast. Isn't the goal to speak, like, as fast as you can?
That's what I always thought, but this episode really challenges that.
Really?
Yeah, when we try to, like, rush through sentences, our brains can't keep up,
Interesting.
which actually leads to more, stumbles and pauses.
That makes sense. It's like trying to fit too much stuff in a tiny box. So what's the fix for this?
Well, one of the key strategies they talk about is this idea of thinking in English.
Thinking in English. Okay. But what does that really mean? Is it just like not translating in your head?
It's kind of deeper than that. It's more about training your brain to actually process thoughts and ideas in English directly without relying on your first language,
I see.
Almost like creating this direct connection between your thoughts and the English words.
So like switching your brain's operating system to English mode.
Exactly. And they gave a cool example of how to practice this. Like, just describe your surroundings in English as you go about your day.
Oh, so like narrate your life in English.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I could see how that could become a habit, but what about when you, like, straight up can't find the right word?
That's where their advice on filler words comes in.
Filler words, I thought those were bad.
I know, right? I always try to avoid them.
Me too.
But the episode actually kind of flips that idea on its head.
It does.
Yeah, it argues that using filler words strategically can actually make you sound more natural.
More natural.
More fluent, even.
Wow, okay, I'm listening.
The trick is to replace those, like, generic and ah sounds
Right.
with phrases that native speakers use.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
They gave some good ones like, well, you see, or is actually...
Oh, okay, so like you use those phrases as a bridge
Exactly.
to help you get to your next thought.
It buys you a few seconds to, like, formulate the next sentence without breaking the flow.
That's pretty clever. It's like a mental pause button.
Exactly. It keeps things moving smoothly.
That's a good way to think about it. But what about, actually like increasing your vocabulary?
Yeah, that's the next piece of the puzzle. The episode had some good tips on how to do that. They really emphasized listening to English podcasts regularly.
That makes sense, yeah.
Immersing yourself in the language without it feeling like studying.
Right, exactly.
They recommended, like, podcasts designed for English learners, or even American podcasts that are accessible to, like, a wider audience.
I bet that exposes you to more vocabulary and speaking styles than just, reading a textbook.
For sure.
Wouldn't it be great if there was a way to, like, practice speaking without the pressure of an actual conversation?
They actually talk about a technique called shadowing. It's all about mimicking English conversations.
Oh, shadowing. I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like you're the voice actor for your own personal English language movie.
Right.
It helps with pronunciation because you're, like, consciously trying to reproduce the sounds.
Yeah.
And fluency because you're training your mouth and brain to say those English words faster and more naturally.
It sounds like a fun way to get those reps in,
Exactly. And the episode encouraged finding, like, audio clips or podcast segments you enjoy so it doesn't feel like work.
Now, this last strategy might surprise you. The episode actually advocates for slowing down.
Wait, shouldn't we try to speak faster? I thought that was the point of fluency.
It's a common misconception. Rushing your sentences leads to more mistakes and pauses because your brain can't keep up.
It's like haste makes waste, but for speaking.
Precisely. The episode stresses that speaking at a natural pace, with pauses for breath, lets your listener understand you better.
Right.
And you actually sound more fluent and confident.
I see. It's all starting to come together now. Thinking in English, strategic fillers, vocabulary building, shadowing, and pacing yourself. It's not just about knowing the words, it's how you use them.
Yeah, and how you deliver your message, exactly.
And you mentioned they give an example of how this all works in an actual conversation, right?
Yes, they use a real-life conversation example.
Cool.
Want to hear it? Yeah, let's unpack that conversation in part 2 of our deep dive. So they've given us all this advice, but, like, how does it actually work?
Right.
You could use an example conversation.
And they did, and it's one that I think most people can relate to. Like, imagine someone asking, what's your favorite hobby and why?
Yeah,
Seems simple enough, but, sometimes you just freeze up.
Totally. You want to sound interesting and smart, but then your mind goes blank. So how did the podcast host answer using these techniques?
Well, they said, well, I really love reading because it helps me relax and learn new things.
Okay.
Actually, I try to read at least one book every month. See how they start with well.
Yeah.
It just makes them sound more like, relaxed.
Right. And then they use actually to give more detail about their reading. That's smart.
Yeah, it sounds like a natural way to, add to their answer, not like they're reading from a script.
Exactly.
And think about the pacing. They're not rushing.
No.
It's comfortable, which makes them sound more confident. Like, it lets the listener follow along.
Yeah.
It kind of emphasizes that fluency isn't just about speed.
Right.
It's about getting your message across clearly.
I see. Yeah. It's interesting how, a small change can make such a difference.
Right.
They're not worried about finding the perfect word. They're focused on keeping the conversation going,
Exactly.
using these techniques as tools.
And that's the key takeaway here, isn't it? It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about being effective.
Yeah.
The episode even encourages listeners to try answering that same question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite hobby?
Yeah.
Using the techniques we've talked about.
It's a good way to practice, in a safe space.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
So it's like taking those fluency tools for a test drive.
Exactly. And by starting with something simple, like talking about your hobbies, you can build your confidence.
Right.
To use those techniques in tougher conversations. But before you start practicing, there's one more thing the episode mentions. They talk about how fluency takes time and practice.
Yeah, you can't become like a pro overnight.
Right. It's like learning an instrument.
Totally.
And it's easy to get discouraged when you don't see results fast. But you have to celebrate the little wins along the way. Maybe you're using fewer ums or you're using those filler phrases better.
Yeah.
Those are all signs you're getting better.
I like that. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And to help with that, they end the episode with a great question.
Really?
They ask, what specific situation would you like to feel more confident speaking English in?
That's a good question. It makes you think about your goals. Instead of just saying, I want to be more fluent, you're thinking about actual situations.
Yeah, like a job interview or giving a presentation.
Or even just chatting with native speakers.
It's about making it personal, so you can practice where it really matters.
This has been really helpful. We've talked about why we hesitate, how to fix it, and even seen how it works in real life.
Yeah, we have.
Before we finish, though, let's go over those 5 key takeaways one more time.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Let's do that in part 3 of our deep dive. Welcome back. I gotta say, I'm feeling, more hopeful about speaking English fluently. I used to think it was like this impossible dream.
Yeah, I hear you.
But this episode really breaks it down. It's like they gave us a map, and now we just gotta follow it.
Totally. Like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And maybe that first step is understanding why we even hesitate.
Right. And once we get that, whether it's vocabulary or fear or even just talking too fast, then we can start using the strategies they gave us.
Yeah, let's go over those 5 key strategies again. First one was thinking in English.
Right.
Remember, it's not just about avoiding translation. It's about making your brain process things in English directly.
Like we were talking about before, describing your day in English as you go.
Yeah, like a mental workout. And speaking of workouts, remember how they flip the script on filler words? Something I used to hate.
I know, right?
Now they're a tool.
It's true. Instead of all those ums and ahs, we can use phrases like, will you see, or actually, to give us a second to think.
Exactly, without sounding weird.
Right, it makes such a difference. And while those filler phrases help in the moment, they also talked about, building up your vocabulary in general.
Right, by listening.
Yeah, podcasts especially, like ones for English learners or just, American podcasts in general.
Tons of new words and phrases you pick up without even trying. And then there was that shadowing technique. I wasn't that sure about it at first.
Me neither, but it's kind of growing on me.
It's like, who wouldn't want to download fluent speech directly to their brain? Shadowing is kind of like that.
Yeah, it is. You're copying native speakers, right?
To train your mouth and brain how to make the sounds right, they said to pick audio you enjoy so it doesn't feel like work.
Smart. And then that last strategy, slowing down, seemed a bit odd at first.
I know, right? We always think faster equals better.
But like they said, rushing just makes you mess up more.
Exactly. Like the tortoise and the hare, slow and steady wins the race.
Slowing down gives you time to breathe, to think, to be clear, which actually makes you sound more fluent.
It's about the journey, not the speed. And speaking of journeys, remember that question the episode ends with.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
What situation would you like to feel more confident speaking English in?
It's a really powerful question. It makes you get specific. Instead of just, wishing to be fluent, you imagine yourself in a specific situation, nailing it, like that job interview, or giving a presentation.
Yeah, or just hanging out with native speakers, feeling comfortable.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about that question. What situation comes to mind for you? And what can you do today, even a small thing, to get a little closer to that goal? Remember, fluency is a process, not a finish line. And every step you take, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction.
Keep practicing, keep trying new things, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself.
You got this.